4 p.m. This is the regular business meeting of the Smithfield Township Board of Supervisors. Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag, the United States of America, and to the republic for which it
4
stands,
p.m. This is the regular business meeting of the Smithfield Township Board of Supervisors. Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag,
Mute
the United States of America.
Cool. It's a critical step. County members present include myself, Chair Jacob Pride, Vice Chair Robert Levenheim. We're expecting him on Zoom. Supervisor Michael Albert, Township Manager Julia Heilica, Conservation Recreation Director Dr. Alex Jackson, Engineer John Tressler, and Solicitor Ron Karasak. There's a standing executive session this evening from 5:36 p.m. to 5:57 p.m. regarding personnel and security, as well as litigation of both the Vecchio and Back 9 matters. First order of business is the consideration of the May 27th, 2025 and June 10th, 2025 regular meeting minutes. I have one quick change, so I'll entertain a motion to approve both with the small change on 9F on the June 10th minutes, subbing candidate for constable, just for clarification.
Constable for,
Removing
Candidate.
constable, putting Ken.
okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Do I hear that motion?
Motion to approve the minutes with that change.
Motion by Mr. Albert, I will second. Questions? All in favor? Aye. Bills and obligations, they total $102,517.14 between the general fund and escrow fund, as well as the capital improvement grant fund. Do I hear a motion on the bills?
I'll motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Albert, I'll second. Discussion.
Brown and Brown, did I ask this last time?
They are our insurance, broker, so they'll handle all of our
Building and,
health insurance, the general, they're not health insurance, forgive me, general liability. They help us with our SWIFT policy, all of that stuff is done.
yeah, that's all.
That's it, Robert's on now. Robert, we're just on the bills.
Okay, I'm here.
Uh,
Do you have a motion to approve?
Yep, so we'll be. Good, second, do you have any questions on the bills, Robert?
No, second.
No more questions.
All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we'll proceed to the solicitor's report, Ron.
The last couple of weeks have been spent basically focusing on the Mountain Manor litigation. There were, I believe, 6 oral depositions taken over the last 2 weeks, including the township manager, Ms. Kaleza. I believe the booths were taken when I was not able to attend because of rescheduling. And Wolf's deposition was taken, Mr. Burns' deposition was taken, Toski's deposition was taken. In addition to written discovery being exchanged between the parties.
My deposition too.
And Mr. Albert's deposition was taken also. The only deposition that was not taken was Mr. Lobenheim, because he was out of the country. Whether or not they're gonna want to take that deposition or not, we'll see. I mean, the deposition or the discovery deadlines expired on June 30, which was last Monday. However, because Mr. Lobenheim was out of the country, it would, fairness would require that he be produced for a deposition at a later time if that's what they want, but right now they haven't requested that. They have requested that we consider trying to settle this case, but it's not there yet. We're just not there. With respect to that, basically trying to propose that maybe we can determine a different schedule, more restricted schedule, et cetera. But, I don't want to bargain against ourselves. If they want to propose a schedule, propose it, and then we'll go from there and we'll see where we are. But I'm not gonna have us make offers that we don't know whether or not they're even close. And then next week, there are some deadlines. There's a deadline for filing expert witness reports. There's a deadline for pretrial memorandum. There's a deadline for motions in limine. And then I believe the week after, I'm not sure exactly when, is there's going to be a view by the judge of the motocross track. I know that Ms. Booth has asked that the judge also view her track. I don't know if that's gotten any play at this point, but not her track, her property. And then at that point, the matter will sit for about 3 or so weeks, and then the hearings will begin for the permanent injunction, which I think, again, are sometime in mid-August, August 22, 23, 21, 22. Like that. And that's what I've been doing. I mean, I've got emails from June that I haven't read, emails from July that I haven't read, so I can't even comment upon what may have been coming in the email because I haven't even read them yet, but that's what we've been doing with respect to Mountain Air.
Awesome. Thank you.
Do we need to take any action on the response in the Vecchio suit?
No, not
No.
this far.
Okay.
Good question.
And
Will anybody from the township be going when they go to view the track?
Yeah.
Possibly my property?
Mhm.
Okay.
That's August 20th.
I have to check
I
again.
think it's the 21st or 22nd of July.
Yeah,
Oh, July, I'm sorry, right. And then that's right, it's a month before
The hearing.
the hearing, correct?
double check, but yeah, someone,
Yeah, I'll double
Actually,
check
all
the
the-
order and then, send another email out to everyone just to double check.
Ron, you can decline to answer if it gets into security and stuff, but when you have things like that, is it customary for sheriff's deputies to be there if the judge is also there?
Generally, the judge will take at least someone from his entourage to be there.
Yeah.
Whether it will be a sheriff deputy, whether it will be a tip staff, whether it will be both, I don't know, but I would doubt that he would come by himself. Although, it wouldn't surprise me. Judge Zulik is a very, different kind of judge in the sense that he'll do whatever is necessary. So he might be there by himself, but I don't think that would happen. I would think someone would be there.
Alright, that would apply to any of the sites that the viewing would occur at.
Yeah, I believe he's just coming to look at the track, as far as I know. I don't think he's gonna be doing the tour or anything.
Okay.
He just
Yep.
coming to do the track, but again, he's the boss. If he says, I'm here now, you know what, I wanna go over there, I wanna go over there, well, he's gonna go over where he wants to go.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
So that's what's going on. Other than that, frankly, there really hasn't been a whole lot of different activity other than responding to emails and other things related to Mountain Man.
Right. Okay. Alright. Thanks, Ron. Engineers report, John.
Wow. Thank you, Jacob. We were just working on a couple of things this last 2-week period. We've been working quite a bit on the master plan for the bike park. That's coming along pretty good as far as the report preparation goes. And I've been also working on the post office road bridge repair. We got comments from PennDOT on our initial submission. They were relatively minor. We've addressed those. It's been, I thought I'd get it back in today, but my schedule was pretty crazy. It's going back into PennDOT tomorrow. I guess I would like to know from the board if we want to advertise this at this point in time.
Advertise the bid?
I believe we're close. We can do that.
Do we have enough information? I mean, we will by bid time, I assume, but to vote on advertising a bid, or we just have voting to approve advertising for a bid for
Yeah, that's all. And I'll proceed with pulling together the documents. If we do this as an emergency, and I don't know if you know this, Ron, or not, I did have time to look it up. But I think I remember before, if we still considered an emergency, we could probably solicit 3 bids. If you wanted to do it that way, or we could go the conventional route and put it on pen bid and see what we get. I have a couple bidders in mind that I'm gonna contact.
Sure.
Even if we go to pen bid, I'm gonna contact them and make sure that, they know about it.
Right.
what are we required to do if it's an emergency, we don't need 5 or something?
I think if it's emergency, you might not even do anything. I'm gonna look now while you guys are talking about other stuff.
if it can wait the 2 weeks, if we have everything ready to go for. I mean, I don't have a problem if we were to,
I mean, I'll make a motion to approve the advertising of a bid to fix bridge,
Post office,
post office bridge,
yes.
right?
so moved by Mr. Albert, I will second.
Second,
Alright,
So I mean, the only other discussion is where it's advertised. I mean, I think. Based on what. Our solicitor tells us, I mean, what do you think's more likely? Is one take a lot longer? Is it a problem?
Well, we can put a short time on it, even if we on pen bid, I guess, we
Right.
can give them 2 weeks and say, listen, you gotta have your bids, it's not complicated.
right,
Right.
So it's a fairly simple repair,
right,
and I would say, yeah, we can go pen bid for 2 weeks, let's do that.
alright,
And then we don't have to worry about it.
So I agree with that as long as that meets the criteria for how long we have to do it. That's per what it's then look at.
Looking here, it says contracts or purchases made by the board involving payments in excess of the required advertising amount, which do not require advertising, bidding, or private quotations, are as follows. One, those made for emergency maintenance, repairs, replacement for water, electric, light, other public works of the township, if they do not constitute new additions, extensions, or enlargement of existing facilities and equipment. And it goes on to some other things.
Well, it qualifies fairly.
It may well qualify for that. There's 9 different sections, so I'm looking as we're talking. Made for materials and supplies or equipment. Under emergency conditions relating to emergency management services, so I'm not sure if this falls under that.
I guess my last question would be if we do for 2 weeks and we don't feel we get anything that's a good bid that's reasonable. We extend it or we have to choose someone.
we can definitely rebid it.
We can rebid it.
All right, then do it for 2 weeks and see what happens.
Robert, any discussion on that?
no,
If you don't think 2 weeks, two more weeks makes a difference, I mean, we can do it for 30 days, I mean, it's taken a little bit longer than I thought.
Yeah, I know we want
Comments back.
to fix that bridge.
Yeah, I think the
Yeah.
2 week fuse is fine, and I mean, I trust that you'll contact enough people that already would know about this type of thing, so that's fine.
Okay, that's what we'll do,
Alright,
and that's all I have on my report.
beautiful. All in favor on that motion?
aye,
Aye.
Right, Robert, we're voting on 2 week advertising of a bid for post office bridge.
I already voted aye.
Okay, perfect. I didn't hear you, sorry.
Awesome. Alright. Energy quote, go ahead. Anything?
Just a brief thing, a large chunk of my June was also spent on the M Manor litigation, working on document discovery for that. In the meantime, the township has issued 17 permits and I've received 5 right to know requests. That's about it.
And you should know, Mr. Chair, that Julia did yeoman's work with respect to that discovery. The discovery is almost 2 reams of paper. A ream of paper is 500 sheets, so it's almost 1,000 sheets of paper that she went through, she documented, she collated, she put them in order. If I would have done it, you would be billed $10 bazillion. I'm only billing you $500 million.
Yeah, that's right.
She did excellent work and she should be commended for that.
Absolutely.
Here.
Awesome.
I agree, Roberta.
The only other thing maybe you wanna mention that we hired an coordinator.
Oh, yes, you'll officially ratify it later in the agenda,
Yeah.
but our new admin coordinator, Jessica, started yesterday, and she is doing amazing stuff and already fitting in, really helpful. I'll see how it goes.
Great. Alright, Alex, we don't have, Pat from the EAC, do you have anything to note, or do you want to? Okay,
I can note, some things from the Environmental Advisory Council meeting that was held last week. Jacob, so they are, promoting an open farm event at Eric White's business, the Hempstead Farm. That's gonna be on August 3rd from, I believe it's 12 to 5. That'll be part of the August newsletter.
August what?
August 3rd.
third,
You should have received an Outlook invite.
Yeah. I'm away, but if you're able to,
I'm
Mike,
away, too.
we'll figure it out. Robert, will you be back?
Which day?
August 3rd.
Yes,
Awesome.
You've got an event to go to. Congratulations.
thank you.
We'll get it. You can provide. Fine. Great. Anything? Oh, all right, perfect. Thanks, Al. Okay, I-80 State Route 611. Tara's here.
Good evening. So tonight, I want to report on two things. The first is our Gateway project, our Gateway pilot program project for the Explorer. Last month, Secretary Burgum of the Department of Interior signed two secretarial orders related to the Explorer Act in general. One was getting into details about many different aspects and mandates in the Explore Act. That briefly mentioned the provision or the section on gateway communities in general, for which the pilot program is one provision in there. And then the second one was all about the gateway communities section and how much of what's in there is going to start to be implemented. It did not get into specifics about how the Gateway Community Pilot Program, the candidates are going to be selected. It didn't mention anything about the pilot program, but what it did do is made it clear that we were ahead of the game in requesting support and getting on their radar, expressing an interest in this thing for the reasons that we did. We were right in line. We used the crystal ball well. So what's gonna come of that, and I don't know when, is the National Park Service, Delaware Water Gap National Recreation Area, is going to have a Gateway Community Liaison. Maybe I'm not getting the right title right, but somebody's gonna be responsible for reaching out to the local community.
This is a staff member of the National Park
It is.
Service.
Yes, and I'm, you feel a little bad that they're gonna get added work put upon them at times like this. However, we're the ones that need this kind of relationship, and it's been lacking in features. So I know one of the standards is they're gonna have to have a meeting at least once every quarter with the communities, or at least solicit and make that kind of invitation. And there's a list of things that are specific to what their objectives are, but again, we're right in there with why we sought to be in that pilot program. So we set the table, we're gonna get you're gonna get some kind of invite, not necessarily me, I coordinated this effort. So I wanted just to get you guys thinking about who's gonna be the person representing Smithfield Township in this endeavor that is gonna start with the park.
Do you know who else is gonna get invited to those meetings? Is there?
I would say
Private
at least
sector.
I don't know if there's gonna be a south and a north. I don't know if, our needs down here are very different than the needs up north.
Huh.
And
Is this only intergovernment or is it private sector as well?
I don't recall.
Okay.
I will send you an email about this, tomorrow. I don't recall the specifics on that. I just wanted to make sure you knew it's game time.
Cool.
I think what'll happen out of this might be part of that. We said we raised our hands or said we wanna be on this team. I think we need to show up. At the camp.
Put our money where our mouth
Yeah,
is.
pretty much so.
Yeah.
So that's that. I thought, happy to see that starting to happen. And then the second thing, I did send the email to PennDOT. I sent it with some questions on June 16th. I'm not gonna get into the specifics of the questions. There are things that we've asked in resolutions all over the place. For example, though I will feature a few examples. Might PennDOT consider proactively initiating the process to nominate the Delaware Water Gap as a national natural landmark, a national historic landmark? What is the timeline for the project? we had been told that it would be the preliminary engineering, which would be beginning in 2025. That and the EIS would take approximately 2 years. Final design would take approximately 2 years. And that time frame would start once they initiated the EIS. That hasn't been initiated yet. We're 6 months into 2025. I thought it was important, yes?
Quick clarification
Please.
question. This question and comment period is related to the PennDOT 611 project, right?
The email today?
No, the email that you said that you sent comments to for June 16th, is that the 611 project or is that the?
Okay, no questions and comments.
Okay,
Something else. New Jersey's all about the comments. We're not gonna talk about that.
okay. I apologize for
That-
getting my wires crossed. there.
It's-
Thank you.
It's a lot and it's complicated. That's why I'm glad I can try to coordinate it. It'd be hard. I can't imagine the individual municipalities keeping all this straight. I sent an email to PennDOT on June 16th. Asking questions about the 611 project.
Okay.
Okay, and I will also clarify. There's a lot of reasons, I was involved in this Explore Act was quite an effort. Getting all that together and a lot of other things that were timely, I had to get done. While. Federal Highway Administration with the new administration and even environmental rules were being changed.
Yeah.
So it just seemed wise to let them figure a few things out before I went in asking the questions that I asked. So I expect when I'm back at the next meeting, I'll be at the first meeting of August. I'll report on those, but I should have them and email them to you. Also, I'll email you this list in the morning as well. Any other questions?
Nope, that was what I needed.
But then the email today, beginning to that,
Okay, which,
Yeah.
yes, I don't wanna eat up your whole
That's all right.
meeting, so I try to stick to the ones that are more necessary. So I will update you on the Jersey side. So 2 things are happening right now. Our MPO, the NJTPA, as I had told you, was involved in the draft long-range transportation plan. And they do that once every 4 years, like mandated, every MPO does this. Jersey was doing theirs. New Jersey put in a strong message, Knowlton, Hardwick, Blairstown, our state legislators, our congressmen, all went on record requesting a fix the S-curve study be in that long-range transportation. Because again, if it's not there, they can't prioritize that when we get to that once every 2-year tip, which is about all the actual projects. So the draft was released yesterday. It's not there. Not a problem, because I do know that the pressure is on the NJDOT, who is the sponsor for anything that happens regarding Route 80, to agree to put that in there. So the comment period is open. I sent my comment in, which had all of those. So that we're on record and you are referenced in there because you guys have passed resolutions like the other municipalities in county. So you're kind of represented as a whole in what we submitted. And I'm sorting through what I want to suggest that towns do about that. Should a comment be forthcoming? Probably, I just haven't sorted through that yet. Sure. But thank you for paying attention.
yeah,
Of course.
Sorry for confusing you. Anything else? No. And sorry, Robert, I did not have the chance yet to ask about the bridge.
oh. It's fine.
Okay,
All right,
good, I'm gonna depart.
awesome. Thank you very much. Supervisors comments. Anything, Michael? Robert, anything? I don't have anything. Okay, old business, discuss the draft lighting ordinance, we're almost ready to go, I know that. Alex has a couple things to ask us about. So at the end of that, I plan to entertain a motion to advertise it and request the formal review, so Alex, go ahead with. What you gotta do.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, so the board was provided with the old draft changes discussed in the last meeting are specifically located on page 30. I can actually pull it up.
Great.
Screen here.
Just before we get into the nitpicky, just so is this is not in 27?
It's a standalone chapter, Supervisor out there. It's chapter 32.
Okay,
It'll be established. And so basically,
but
You
there
want-
are
over
lighting
your screen there.
sections, sorry.
do you want me to just kind of give a very quick, you've already talked about this many times, but
Yeah.
I have it on the screen. I'm just giving you the elevator pitch. You
Yeah,
have,
I mean, for me, the details of, I like the details, but I just wanna make sure it's the way it's integrated with any other lighting requirements and wanna make sure that, it's not just sort of, for when new construction happens, that we're making sure there's an ability to address lighting issues when, someone decides to install a new light bulb as opposed to build a light tower, which I think it does.
I believe you're correct.
Okay.
And on the screen, you'll see all the definitions. There's many pages of definitions with illustrations, which the county planning commission encouraged. There's very clear illustrations on acceptable versus unacceptable lighting fixtures, as you can see. And so then the ordinance goes down quite a ways, and then we arrive at, here you go, on page 30 and 31. And this is what I was hoping the board could discuss. We'll wait till Jacob there gets back though.
Yeah. All the new, highlighted in yellow.
Mhm. And this is based on alternative solicitors.
Comments.
Yeah.
And our feedback last time.
Correct.
So this is the updated text based on our comments.
Mhm.
And it was addressing appeal, making sure it wasn't to both, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Primarily like light control officer. Attorney Well suggested language that gives the board an an option to put together a more detailed criteria, but he wasn't specific in how to do that. So I put together that sentence, which allows you to establish by resolution a formal training protocol based on field-based experience.
right.
It's basically an option that addresses his comment.
The only edits were in these two sections.
Correct.
Okay.
30 and 31.
I
And
looked,
then-
I looked at those personally. I don't see any issues with them.
Okay.
And that's right. This was the one where Attorney Kidwell highlighted that it seemed appropriate being outside of chapter 27, and enforceable and so that's good. The only changes are these two pages. I mean, I've just highlighted that I don't have any. It's in keeping with our conversation
Yeah,
last meeting. Was that last meeting or 2 meetings ago?
I think it was the last meeting where we talked about alternate solicitor Kidwell's.
Comments which are
Yeah.
to be integrated.
The biggest thing he had that I remember was having a resolution to establish the training for the
Right.
LCO. So I don't have any
It
issues.
does say, right, that I feel like it does want to make sure that the LCO is effectively reporting to
Mhm.
the zoning or codes officer, the code officer.
Yeah.
But the code officer has the ability to do all these things as well.
Doesn't say that, what you said. That's a question if you just wanna add that simply.
I thought somewhere else I'd read that. Coding officer. Coding officer,
Yeah,
Codes enforcement.
codes enforcement officer has jurisdiction over all,
codes.
Yeah.
So should. I just don't want to get into a situation where our coding officer or coding officers, it's not a programmer. Codes enforcement officer goes and records something, because the codes enforcement officer is the one that does the training to the light control officers. So it just, I want to make sure it's okay for the codes enforcement officer to go and record the lighting if they so chose to do so. But is that clear here?
That might be.
Ron, the codes enforcement officer can enforce any chapter of the code of ordinances. So long as it's not zoning, because then that would all be enforced by the zoning officer.
Yeah, it says right here, when the township code enforcement officer or the light control officer determines an installation produces an acceptable levels of glare.
But I would tell you that if we have floating around somewhere the definition of a code enforcement officer, we should make sure that it's comprehensive to cover all of the things that we've been doing with respect to this. I just don't know how a definition, or if we have a definition of code enforcement, to make sure we're covered.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Would that have to be defined in the standalone chapter?
It should be defined in here, I would say probably yes, because it's gonna be standalone.
Okay.
If it's like a zoning or something like that, that's different, then you could just do the general definition. But I can tell you as a lawyer that have been doing this, that's the first line of attack I would say, is that the citation should be, dumped because it wasn't issued properly.
Yeah. Well, the
By
citation
the
still
right
has to come,
person and all that
the
stuff.
citation still has to come from the code enforcement officer, right? But
Yes.
it's just it's giving control over to collect the data, right? That's how I read this.
Correct.
So it sounds like I need to just insert a standard definition that you have in your standalones for code enforcement. You already have a definition for light control officer.
Yeah, I would probably add that.
Okay.
Just to be safe.
Just want to see if you already have it, applicability.
Not sure if the zoning code has a definition of a code enforcement officer, but if it does, it wouldn't matter because it's not gonna be under zone.
Correct.
So it should have its own depth.
I don't see it.
And it can't hurt, when I looked at some of the other ordinances under. A couple of them have a different definition of enforcement officer, so I think I would be fine. Entertaining the motion to move forward and including that. Make sure that gets to the planning commission for their. They meet in August.
Is it okay to
They
have
meet
different,
Thursday.
can you define the same thing more than once in your zoning? In a different chapter? That seems like it's not right.
Well, but if this is not zoning, defining it under zoning isn't gonna help. It's gotta have its own definition.
So every,
Its own standalone
def-
ordinance means that it has to be able to stand on its own.
but every term that is believed to require defining needs to be in every chapter,
If it's going to be a standalone ordinance, yes,
single chapter, not,
or standalone chapter, however you wanna say it.
because you can have an ordinance that just amends a small thing. That
You
ordinance
can
does not-
say, if you want, that the code enforcement officer definition is the same definition as found in the zoning ordinance. That's
I think
the same definition as found in the floodplain ordinance or whatever,
Right.
you know,
I think that
you
would
could
be,
do that.
I think that would be fine.
Or copy verbatim from, is it in the zoning?
Well, in a couple spots. You have
definition?
enforcement officer, fine, so under the enforcement chapter. Like, for example. Under the fire, you have a different enforcement mechanism.
But the
It's similar,
definition's not there.
right? So code enforcement has its own thing, but under chapter 30, which is the official map. That talks about enforcement officer, and that just says the agent or official designated by the township to administer and enforce the provisions of this chapter.
So
So
it has to be a different one.
so I think it probably makes sense just to have the reference. Cause otherwise you're not going to find,
So you can't reference that because it references the other chapter. So why don't you just copy and paste, as opposed to referencing, state the same one that's there. The person that is responsible for enforcing.
You could also do just a resolution and say that the township is defining the code enforcement officer as the person responsible to enforce the following ordinances, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You can do it that way too. Then you have one resolution and you're done. Then the definition would be code enforcement officer as per resolution number 32145. You do it that way too, if it's easier. Fear with that is you might miss an ordinance, so when you start listing
Right.
that he or she can do this.
It doesn't hurt to be redundant though. So redefine them, just make sure it's the same definition as found in the other chapter. And I'm also feel okay in advertising to be reviewed.
that's perfect.
If there's a problem, the review may catch it anyway.
Yeah. All right, Alex, if you want to close that, then I'll entertain the motion to advertise, or authorize advertising of the ordinance and request the formal planning commission reviews of the draft
Both,
planning.
both
ordinance.
commissions?
Yes.
Right.
Do I hear that motion?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Albert, do I hear a second?
Robert, you wanna move this to the planning commission, the lighting ordinance?
I have connectivity issues. I'll second it. Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Alright,
Aye. Okay, discussing the draft data center ordinance. Alex also has done yeoman's work on this, so I'll let you take that away.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So like, hold up the screen. Board had asked me to put a comparison together in light of the recent and future model ordinance. Now, there are some outstanding points of discussion because the way this and future ordinance is written is a bit different than the previous draft that I had prepared for the board. On the right, you'll see all the definitions as proposed. On the left, you will see what is currently in your zoning ordinance. And as you go down, you'll see anything in purple is what's been added now that we've looked over the Penn future model ordinance, including a data center accessory use definition. Data center definition's been adjusted slightly to include things like blockchain transaction processing, cryptocurrency. Data center accessory use is a curious definition because it says ancillary uses of structures secondary and incidental to a data center. And then it goes on to list those. So it's that one's interesting, something to think about. Does this include, like, if Vigon wanted to put a little data center in to support their existing use? That's just an example. I'm not saying they're gonna do that. Would that be covered under that?
I
Or
think
that's
it's,
something we need to be concerned about?
I don't think so, because when you see that it's incidental to a data center use, this is an accessory to the data center
Correct.
itself.
It's okay. Now, is that a scenario that we want to address, or is that covered under the data center definition?
I think the idea, the challenge, the difference is. Where's the front? Did the original, did the model say data center buildings, or did it say building?
Which model?
Oh, the one that you pulled this definitions from,
The Penn Future one?
yeah,
This is a copy and paste from their model.
okay.
So
Well, I guess I'm sort of surprised, because this say a building or buildings, because I'm just assuming if someone wanted to have. I don't know why you have to have this in there, but you have a separate building, I guess it's like having a shed for your data center, you wanna make sure you define that it's not the main building, and. Cause I guess later on, they'll say, well, you can, cause it wouldn't have to have a main entrance feature on.
Right.
The like so, and.
Well, it sounds like if it's a secondary structure that, I don't know, I guess the power.
Is there anything in the rest of it about? Requirements specific to the accessory?
the data center accessories is listed typically on the top of each criteria, so like. They'll say a landscape buffer is required between data centers, disaster recovery facilities, data center accessory uses, so it's covered under all of the criteria basically.
So it's the same coverage, it's just to make sure we captured everything.
Yeah.
Okay, then there's no harm in having it in.
Yeah.
That was the first point. Sensitive receptors are now added. These are things like schools, preschools, daycare centers, in-home daycares, places of worship, parks, campgrounds, et cetera, et cetera. The submission checklist is in there. Schedule use is a key difference. It's not highlighted in purple because the board already kind of decided that they wanted to have it conditional use in the ED district and permitted in the M1 district. But your current ordinance is principal permitted in all the districts, so there wouldn't be a hearing to promote proposed in the ED zone.
Question, when we update our ordinances, do we automatically update the table? Of uses?
Yes.
Part of creating the ordinance is you'll see a spot that says, you know, we're going to add this to this zone and whatnot. The physical update of that happens by people at E-code. They will take the ordinance that we passed, interpret it, and add it to section 309.
You don't have to have it in
That's
Please
correct.
delete this and add this under, because that would be hard to describe.
Yeah, we
Okay,
just
I'm
have
just
to-
curious. I don't remember ever seeing that. And I was like, we're doing that, though, right? Okay, good.
Okay, so the next one is dimensional standards. That is the new section that we've added in this updated one based on Penn Futures. The maximum height 60 feet, which includes the roof mounted equipment like cooling and ventilation systems, HVAC units, et cetera, et cetera. So if they have a big HVAC unit that's 30 feet tall, that would be part of the 60 feet. So
Is that, what is our current requirement in the M1 for height?
I am in the process of looking that up right now.
One understands. And then what about ED?
I know in ED it's 45, but it can go up to 55 with the board's approval.
So does this, by making this, we're giving it, but that's before the utilities on top.
include the 60 feet.
I know this does, but does the 55 in ED does not include?
I don't know that.
I feel like it doesn't, but.
No, it doesn't.
So,
Mhm.
So that'd be about 60 feet as well.
Mhm.
well, sometimes those things are 10 feet tall. I don't know necessarily if for building height, it should be more restrictive or the same level of restriction. And I guess it's my other question, is there a reason why we're adding this when it's already in our zone? What is maximum allowed?
Good question. And it's an organizational choice, because if you look at number 2, for example, it clearly states that accessory uses can't be any greater than the height of the principal building. So if they have a big cooling tower next to it or something, that can, and then the third one here says that's where they put this setback, but from residential.
Yeah,
So I think it's
well,
mostly.
the setback's important to have,
Yeah.
because that might be unique, but building height tends to be set by zone as opposed to by use, but. I mean, so I'm just saying, is it necessary to have that if that's already in keeping? And if it's not, if ED says 45 and this says 60, which is the right one?
So it's actually 40, but if
This
it's
would-
part of a mixed use. Be different.
This one would take precedence over what you
In
have.
the M1, it's 35 right now.
Really? But we've done variances for that every time.
I can tell you that, the
35
data
is-
center applicant in Upper Mount Bethel Township, where I was solicitor,
One of like 120.
where I am solicitor, yeah, they said we can't do anything with 60 feet. We need at least 85 feet, if not higher.
Right.
So if we make it 60, does that mean that we're exclusionary?
I don't think it's exclusionary, but, they would have to come in if this is a zoning change. And it is a zoning change, it's under zoning.
They need to come
It's
to the
land use,
hearing
they'd have to
board.
come in for a variance. Could it be exclusionary? It could be. I mean, that's what Amazon was saying. How do I know if, Verizon would say something else or somebody would say something else, but they were wanting. In fact, it was 120 feet with the roof projections. 100 feet max with 20 feet for roof projections. And the issue was, do we gonna have a fire truck that can reach that? What happens if something bad occurs? But, so keep that in mind. I'm not sure if 45 feet does the trick, but you can keep it in and go do whatever and just move forward.
All right, I mean, let's keep going. I think it's a question.
Yeah.
Well, the aesthetics are all virtually the same, screening and fencing. Couple of sentences were added, including I thought that the description and model ordinance on fencing was better in Penn Futures, so I just pretty much incorporated that. That's on page 4 of 9. There's also some pretty sharp language on verbiage, but otherwise it's basically the same exact criteria that I had put together for you for the most part.
Mhm.
If you go into the landscape buffer, again, very similar criteria. There were some slight edits from this versus the previous one, but it's basically the intent is virtually the same, other than E, which I thought was great language on explaining how existing vegetation could be used.
Yeah.
Instead of, planting a buffer yard.
Well, we often, does that have to be variance? It's not gonna be waived.
This would be by
Landscape buffers?
right if you can basically,
It's the zoning, would have to get a variance.
Right.
It can't be waived.
So, but this
Yeah.
item allows it to be.
No, this item says the board can do it.
That's what I'm saying. Without this, they'd have to get, which I think makes sense in an area that's heavily wooded.
Mhm.
We don't want them to knock down a forest to plant a line of trees.
It does say the board can do it. I'm not quite sure if that flies in a zoning order, but
Is that, did that come, this bid come from the,
We've got some others.
We have some others that say that, but I don't know why, they're pushing up the shop.
but who would, I mean, I guess a neighbor might argue. I mean, the reason why we've allowed this in the past is literally because it was in the forest, and if you made them do this, they have to cut the
Right.
forest down and add less trees, it's stupid.
No, I think the question is, was the board, who has the authority to approve? That's the question.
So you're saying they could go before the zoning hearing board, would the zoning hearing board be reasonable in that case? Maybe. Probably.
No, good question.
Well, I assume they'd get that, but do they, you know, it's a legal question.
Right.
The zoning hearing board, it's not a policy question for them, so.
In the previous version I put together, I think I added the criteria of. In this one, it's pretty much straight from the Penn Future ordinance, but my previous criteria is that it has to be at least like 30 or 40 feet tall, the vegetation can't just be shrubs.
Right.
So you might want to take the one I had previously, if you're concerned about vagueness, you might want to just take what I had previously written, that way the trees or vegetation has to at least be like 30 feet.
Oh, I think that makes sense, cause like everyone hates, like when you drive up to Mount Pocono and they put up a giant warehouse, but it's like, oh man, they planted some bushes in front, that's nice.
Well, the challenge with that, although from, you know, the developer's standpoint would be. Those trees will be eventually that height, but you can't really plant 30-foot trees. That's not how they come.
So you can, it's very expensive.
It's prohibitively expensive.
Yeah, it's a single truck. that will-
Oh, I've seen those, and they usually replace, that's usually when you're moving a tree from one place to another. You tend not to buy trees like that.
Correct, just to clarify, Michael, so it says, if you're gonna, let's say that existing vegetation is not there and it's not 30 feet in height. That's what I'm trying to say, is you would have to plant trees that are 8 feet in tall, that's what it says currently on page 4 of 9, so that's 8 feet. Like if there's no vegetation that's more, like, let's say the vegetation is, there's 10 feet, and they would have to clear that and plant 8-foot trees.
But even that, how does that,
Evergreens too.
but if you've already got a 10-foot tree, what sense does it make to pick that down and put in an
Right.
8-foot tree?
Right.
That's a reasonable point, and
Agreed.
that's something to discuss. You wanna just say if it's a minimum 10 feet of height, you're okay. Existing vegetation, because the use is 60 feet, so it's, you know, the pine trees they plant is eventually gonna be 60 feet. That existing vegetation might not be, it might just be a, you know. A spice bush.
Is the remedy for that to account for that in text amendment to the Saldo ordinance? I know you don't wanna get into specific types of uses, but I mean, is this common across other larger scale developments? Where they're cutting down trees and where we'd rather than, you know, keep them up instead of having to plant much taller ones later? I don't remember. it
I
coming
don't
up in
think
the
we
past.
ever were concerned on the development to date about the height, the
Yeah,
ultimate height of trees.
right. Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, like, I don't know. We can, at the end of this, we can get an informal review from the county planning commission, they can. Sort of decide what's reasonable or what they would see in other cases, I mean. Jackson Township, Seager, and all those folks were talking about this too, did any of them? Ultimately go with planning 20 or planning to 8 or 30 feet tall, please.
They're formally advertised at this point, they're gonna adopt almost certainly, so whatever they have is. I mean, I didn't take a look at their ordinances, I haven't, if that's what you're asking.
I'm just rereading this, I think what's written here is fine, honestly, too.
Um,
But can I go,
I can tell you what we've done on 2 projects recently in other townships, just for food for thought,
Sure.
where they've had existing vegetation. And rather than argue with it back and forth during the approval process, we've required them to show on their plans whatever the ordinance requires in terms of planting new vegetation. And then, if their plan is approved and they move forward with construction, we will then meet on site and we will collectively identify what existing trees
meet that criteria,
meet that criteria.
that makes more sense.
And
Yeah.
then, you know, they may have 10 trees out there that meet the criteria, and if they only need 12, then they have to plant 2 more.
Right,
That's how we've been handling it, and I think it's fair
Yeah.
and an easier way of doing it.
Yeah, for sure. I like
These
that.
ordinances don't say you can't have additional trees.
That's true too.
So, so this means, yeah,
These are
that's,
minimum
that's my
requirements.
tree there right there, that one, that's that one, that's that one, and then the rest is
Yeah.
extra, you know. All right. So that is encompassed in here too then, that doesn't. I mean, I guess it just says if existing vegetation is adequate.
Right. All right, well, I think that's sufficient then.
Can I just, I'm sorry, can I just go back real quick, because I was just looking on the other side. So the other side does talk about backup generators and power systems having to be buffered. But does that fall under, any accessory building?
On the existing criteria?
On the existing criteria, it talks about backup generators having to be fully enclosed with the municipal structure. It's in screening, but then. Doesn't talk about backup generators, but it does talk about accessory buildings, so I assume that that would fall under that. Does accessory buildings say backup generators in there?
I believe it does. It lists like a dozen or more types of things, like substations.
Okay, that counts.
Yeah,
All right, that's that. Thank you. Very
good
nice.
question. So if you want, Mr. Chairman, I could take what John suggested and just codify that, but I can sum that up in a sentence, just add that there.
It kind of sounds like what's there might do that.
It's up to you. That would be more vague to go with how it's currently written. It doesn't specifically say it.
Well, it allows the the supervisors can say,
Yeah,
just submit it on the plans.
yeah, it's. I mean, I would personally recommend adding more detail because then it's just, it could potentially,
Well, John, if you have a suggestion on language that would make that tighter, I don't know.
Well, we've used this type of language and
I feel
just,
like,
because, a developer comes in and he's got most of his hard stuff done. And then he doesn't want to argue for back and forth for 3 months, whether the existing vegetation is adequate or not. If it's the winter, it's hard to tell what it's gonna look like
right,
because the leaves are off.
yeah,
So it's just easier to say, you put on the plan what's required, you escrow for it. Then when it comes time to plan,
yeah,
we'll make the determination.
that's what I mean, like I codify what you just said. That's what I'm trying to say. Because I think if it's not specifically written, it could,
that's good.
I need something forward.
No, I don't think there's any issue there. Back to Michael's question that he just asked that I thought was satisfied, so. Data center accessory use says the use shall not include energy generation systems used or intended to be used to supply power to the data center during normal operations.
Okay,
So
so
that
where's
excludes
that?
like a substation.
So
It
where is
sounds
that
like
then?
it's generators, yeah. So is that still subject?
Well, that means like what it says, that means the generator has to be enclosed within the principal structure. It's
Yeah.
not written the same way.
Okay,
So in other words, your accessory use does not include
yeah,
that, and
Perfect.
therefore it must be in the main building. I mean, that's a
Alright.
useful thing.
so it's all buffered though.
The real big change, I would say more than anything else, is Penn Future had an extremely thorough criteria list for utilities, which I have pretty much copied here almost verbatim.
Mhm.
Power, there's not as much, and there wasn't any one I put together for the board originally. It's just, I think, to keep consistent, I just concluded there because it's not substantively different than what I put together, but it's really emergency management. There's a bunch of criteria, and then for water, if it's not central water, there's a bunch of criteria which I recommend. Because
It's
of,
funny, we have these things, but
Yeah.
you'd be out of your mind to build it if you didn't have confirmation from that.
Correct.
From the electrical company that you can power
It's like,
it.
I don't need the will server.
It's like, oh, here, let's invest $100 million or whatever it would cost to build it, and then, oh yeah, we can't do that. So fine having it there, it doesn't hurt just to ask for the letter from
Right,
these companies, all right?
yeah, the water criteria is exceedingly thorough, and I think one of the strongest parts of the model ordinance. You look at, if it's not connected by central water and they're trying to tap into the groundwater, this is gonna really protect your community by making sure that they front load a lot of that description so that there's no surprises after the fact, because you don't want some big cone of depression causing wells going dry from a data center pole.
right,
But it's good because it also it doesn't instigate a minimum requirement of, or availability of water. It basically says your projected water demands have to meet the availability.
and. how-
But I think it's important because I have heard that some centers don't rely on a lot of water. They initially fill up with water, but it's a different, their cooling is not, it's like a glycol or something. It's not
Right.
water.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Same thing with like the electricity, I thought was good, was the that there has to be no impacts on electric rates if they're directly attributable to the project.
Do we? Are there any of these places putting up massive solar? As they get built?
I don't know if any.
It's developing, it's an emerging technology with a lot of.
Although it's a technology that it no longer has tax credits, so it's not gonna happen in the next 5 years, but.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to see, honestly, I like the tough part is that decommissioning of the solar, but
But I think it's already covered under our solar. So I think
yeah,
we're
it
fine.
is.
Okay, all right. Sorry, carry on.
And sound and noise is pretty much the same as you previously discussed. I like the way the Penn Future had the as-built sound study. So there's two sound studies, a preliminary study and then as-built. I thought that the way they explained that was superior to what I had put together. So you're pretty well covered.
I think it has to reference our,
And yep, and it does definitely reference your existing noise ordinance. It also adds some additional criteria for things like sound, for like vibrations and humming. That would be like the octave band. So in
Right.
addition to decibels, there's also octave band. So this would require a comprehensive sound study.
and that's already in our current ordinance anyway.
And it's pretty much,
Yeah.
what's not there is just, if you look on the left, you'll see exactly what's in your current ordinance.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same, right?
Yeah, there's more detail, now they need a preliminary and as-built.
I mean, the table's exactly the same.
Table is exactly the same, absolutely. Yeah. So that's pretty much it. The only other thing is there is also a vibration study that I included in the emissions and ground vibrations portion from Penn Futures. So you already had ground vibrations in there. Now they just have to prove that. That's up to you if you want to include that. If you think it's a bit much considering everything else, you don't have to include it. I just figured I'd point that out to the board.
Oh, it's very interesting.
Mhm.
Obviously, this exists in other forms because in states where you deal with like more earthquakes more frequently and stuff, they have this type of equipment to determine the vibration. I mean, this is very detailed that associated equipment will be perceptible to the human sense of feeling beyond the property line.
That's important. You don't want to be
Yeah.
in the neighboring property and
Yeah,
feel the vibration in your basement.
absolutely. No, I think we gotta keep that.
Um. And yeah, because who knows if it's a certain way and the 200, I mean, 200 feet is a lot, but maybe it's not enough. I guess for me, my only question is the height and, I just want to make sure if it truly is impossible to build this structure, then you're effectively making it exclusionary, which makes it, I just think we need to understand that. And potentially a way to resolve that would to be keeping it at 60 in the ED and maybe higher in that M1, I personally think. Because
Yeah,
what are the heights of current buildings in the M1 are already, what are they? What is the Vigon building?
I know that's tapered, but I forget at the high end what that is.
I know they got a variance for that.
Yes.
Yeah, it would have to be very.
So,
Well, I wouldn't get too hung up with whether or not the ordinance is exclusionary or not. We're really not there yet. I think you're still gonna have this reviewed by other agencies or areas, so just leave the numbers that you want and then see what the rest.
well, what did we say? Did we find out what M1 was? What's the height in M1?
I believe it was 35.
No, 55. 35 is ED.
Um,
35 is M1,
35 was
40 is ED with residential going up to 55. With board approval. Now,
But we've
That's
already had
probably
this
not-
conversation that that's not high enough for
I
M1.
was gonna say, I think that's definitely the case. Maybe even some of these are kind of low anyway, and we can avoid future variances if they were.
All right, well, let's just leave it for now and
Yeah.
see what the review comes back with.
So yeah, Alex, if you can make that change and get the county planning commission to review that, I think that would be good next step.
Are we allowed to have them reviewed until?
Oh, yeah, they can, Along with the request, what do they call it, requesting technical assistance?
I would comment that we already sent them the ordinance when we asked for that map, and they didn't come back with any comment. So that was a sort of an informal review request. They don't always grant us I would clarify, I've sent some things for the board's request, and they sometimes they don't. One
Sometimes
thing
they say it comes down to policy.
Maybe just respond, with the updated one.
Yeah.
Said, I know you didn't have any comments last time, but if you have any new comments,
Yeah.
change it to red.
Yeah, I could, it's, if you wanted to try to do an informal, I know your planning commission wanted a copy of this, so maybe you could send it to them at least and start getting their feedback on this, get the ball rolling.
I'd like to get at least one more crack from the county before we give it to the local planning
Because
commission.
they're gonna get it formally, so to the local planning commission formally, right?
But you could send it in formally and request their, this is, from my experience, it takes the county some time to actually respond to an informal request.
All right.
That's just my recommendation, it's up to the board, I don't wanna.
That's fine. I mean, just with the understanding that it's not supposed to be.
Yeah, let them know it's an informal.
Yeah.
The only reason I bring it up is because they specifically asked for it a couple, like maybe a month ago, they specifically wanted to see this.
Is that a formal action? Do we need to vote on that?
They're just taking an informal, essentially a sketch look at it. I don't have a problem with doing it without it.
Sure.
Alright. Cool. Oh, that will be good then.
So do we table? No.
Now,
Okay, it's a discussion item. Okay.
yep. Alright,
Well, do you want to know if there's any comments on that one?
anyone have? Jane?
Just maybe a point of interest, your comment about solar. When I lived in Georgia, there was a data center near Atlanta from one of the huge companies, and they required that enough solar be added to the grid to power their data center. It wasn't put on the building, it was put in South Georgia on a couple hundred acres of farmland. So, yeah, so it was all set.
Can you mandate them to do something on the property you don't control?
And who mandate,
Could we mandate, I've never heard that in here, that you would that Smithfield would say, if you're gonna have this building here, you must put X amount of solar somewhere, and it doesn't have to be in this township. Cause I don't think it could be in the township based on the ordinance.
No, definitely not. But I think that's why you're seeing the state sort of trying to preempt us a little bit by taking some of that authority. I don't necessarily agree with everything PSAT says about, local control, but the state is trying to assert themselves on data centers because they're trying to find places. I mean, John, are you engineering the place in Bucks that's getting the $20 billion Amazon? Yeah. So they're kind of trying to preempt that by saying fulfilling this state process will constitute local.
Are you saying that we're doing all this and then like 6 months, we're gonna be usurped?
No, but I think specifically on the energy side of it, like I think we will be free to, like, we should absolutely have these protections, but
Okay.
the energy side of, those approvals, we don't really control a lot of that.
So like the solar energy
Yeah.
side of it would be at the state level.
I
Okay,
think the state can come in and say, all right, if you want to put, 200 acres of, solar in Columbia County to power your, offset your impact in Smithfield, I think that's something that they want to do.
okay. Interesting. So that could be added later if there is an ability to do so with a state.
Yeah,
And the state might require that the local townships adopt something.
right, well, because we don't want them to. Let's say hypothetically, we know they've been public about, getting the studies for Smithfield Gateway for their northern section. If they were to pursue that, I don't think any of us would want to see the balance of it filled out by solar panels.
No,
So,
I don't think so. Be nice to have solar, but
yeah, I mean, I'm amenable to it on the roofing, like I know in some places it's required on.
it wouldn't cover their electrical needs
No,
on the roof.
I don't think even close, maybe for their office.
I would raise this point before, is there any provision for sunsetting the technology in 50 years when everything is different and they have this huge building? How they're gonna deal with it, how the township might be able to control how the building is
Well, the
still.
state is adopting, or state has adopted very close, I guess, decommissioning standards. For solar,
That's for solar. I
uh,
don't know if you can have a decommissioning standard for a building now.
no.
It's a very specific building.
That would have to come from the state, because we don't have the power to require that, unfortunately. Like in other places, the adaptive reuse is kind of built into, their ordinance, like we're encouraging that now, but we don't have the power to say. You should build this in a way that it can be this later.
But it's gonna sunset. Technology and move on, what is Smithfield gonna look like when that happens? I mean, now's the time to think about that stuff. Which we need to.
Yeah, I think it's just a question of whether we can,
Right,
like,
it's all new stuff though, it's all.
but like even looking back, I don't think there's anything that could have been done for malls to say you have to decommission them.
Very specific. I mean, it's a very unique. With all the power,
Craft brewery, sorry.
I mean, we're gonna have a power infrastructure. And they may wanna put a micro nuclear reactor on the place to power it. It's a new technology.
Well, I looked at that, very specifically this morning. I will say totally that Smithfield is not the type of place where large scale facilities like that are even possible.
It's too
Not
much.
large scale, but they're coming up with really small reactors.
That's true, but
Submarine size.
True.
yeah, that's true. But I don't foresee that. I don't think we currently have regs that cover that. I mean, I think we're pretty much preempted on that. So whatever the state is going to say is okay. As far as power, we'll kind of have to go.
With regarding the sunsetting, can we leave that open to exploration so that we might be able to?
Can I just ask council, do you know of any ability to sunset a building?
I have not seen that in my time. Is it possible? I suppose anything is possible, but usually you're sunsetting a use more than a building. This has to be done within, this use has to be done or finished or.
Or you do it within your blight rules, your blight laws, not specific to the use, because this is about the use and the zoning of building and that. But if I would expect if you were gonna wanna do that, it would be related to abandonment and.
Well, you make a good point with, for example, malls. 50 years ago, malls were up and coming and they were gonna be terrific. Now, with the advent of the internet, who knew that, brick and mortar stores would no longer be, favored and everyone would now be buying things online. So that's a good example as to when that was done, there was no sunsetting. That doesn't mean that it could not have been done, and maybe it could have been a good idea, but it wasn't done there. So again, I just haven't seen it.
The only thing that I could think of, the only mechanism that sort of exists is some sort of, performance bond or whatever, but John, have you heard of any municipalities that bond the eventual demolition of?
It's a long bond.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't think that's legal. I think they would say, you can't hold us to that.
Yeah, I don't know that.
The only way townships that I have seen have been doing it, dealing with, cell towers. When the cell tower is done, whatever, there's a bond. to take.
Well, there is for solar too,
Right.
decommissioning of that, but
So I've seen that, and making that jump may not be that big of a jump, but I just don't know that answer.
I think the argument is. It's a building still, and there could be another use, whereas solar panel, there's not really any other use for that thing. Once it's done, it's done. That's why you would make it a skate park or something.
Well, again, that's why I think we're very fortunate in that, even if we do have to eventually confront that issue, these buildings are dramatically smaller compared to the places that are gonna get 1,000 acres of this.
Yeah. All right,
I mean, they're going to have the articulable walls and all these different things that will sort of help reuse. And did we require them to articulate like a front office facade? I think we did. Yeah,
yeah,
so I like that. So it's at least we're thinking toward that.
page 3 and page 4.
Yeah.
it's very possible that those data centers are gonna keep getting bigger and bigger, and then at some point they'll start getting smaller and smaller. As you get into, you know, quantum,
Oh, for sure.
yeah, so.
That's gonna be on us. It gets smaller, the industry shrinks. We're gonna be on our lane.
Yeah,
Well, we'll certainly keep.
yeah, I
an
think
open
if the
mind.
building becomes blighted and no longer useful, there's mechanisms to do that in blighting. Laws versus the laws around the use and building of it.
Pretty good luck you found it.
I don't know that that's legal.
Not on your own property.
Right.
All right,
Jacob, can I ask a question, please?
Go ahead.
What about the toxic runoff for these data centers? What does the township have in plan for these, for the ordinance?
For what?
Toxic runoffs that these data centers have?
Alex, you can answer that definitively, but I mean, we've got pretty comprehensive environmental studies and regulations that apply in that case, but I don't know that there's anything specific. I mean, we're not really the final arbiter of anything environmental. So,
Mr. Chairman, I vaguely recall that with some of the warehouse and distribution center and truck terminal ordinances, there's provision for like containment.
right,
That's in addition to the stormwater provisions that would catch any harmful, like, that could then potentially be added into here since it's.
but there's not trucks in this.
Mhm.
I just.
That is there because of the massive amount of truck traffic.
Yeah,
And that's where you're really looking at the managing of non-building, right? You're not talking about the building, you're managing the vehicles coming into the building, so
an
it's
accidental
separate.
spill, like.
But if you're talking about the spill from the building,
Mhm.
I also feel like aren't we protected through
well, DEC, the ultimate
DEP
enforcer.
regulations?
Yeah,
I don't
That's
even know
how
how
we
we
got-
enforce that stuff.
that's, well, we don't, I don't.
even know what's runoff. I don't know if there is runoff, but even if there is runoff or some.
But it wouldn't,
That would
it
fall
wouldn't
into
be runoff.
DEP,
It would absolutely, it would have to be,
a spill of the
Yeah.
cooling system or
and
something.
that's covered by. The emergency management plan, not only that the township has, but also in the ordinance and. In the event of those toxic spills or something, if, I highly doubt, but if that were to be the case. The county emergency management agency. Would contact, forget, Julie, what's the formal title of the technical experts that would deal with like a toxic spill? It's like the same procedure if like gas were spilled all over the road or something. Mary Ellen, I watched her have a presentation about that at tour we had on that, about, yeah, about fire.
I'm also blanking on the name right now.
It exists though, I mean, I it's a work in progress on our end, but it exists and is not really within our dominion beyond this ordinance.
Jacob, the only thing I can think of that could fall under that umbrella, like typical runoff. It's just hitting impervious surface. I don't know what toxins they're gonna acquire, but let's say there's an accidental spill of like a cooling tower and a bunch of coolant. You know, you could put a provision in there for like, let's say. A car drives into the cooling tower, you get, 20,000 gallons of toxic coolant, like that.
That's still handled by
Mhm.
DEP though.
Yeah.
And when
I
that
don't think-
happens, there's a whole bunch of requirements that are,
Mhm.
there's a whole activated portion of DEP. That the township has no jurisdiction
Right.
to go over.
Yeah, they're
And-
called
and-
in by.
And I don't know that you wanna be encouraging more impervious, right? They wanna put pervious in, that's generally good for stormwater. We don't want more concrete if we don't have to have it.
Just a thought.
Yeah, the Commonwealth steps in though, so like that.
Another one, what about the water supply? Like everyone's homes have well, and
It addresses that, there's a whole section on, a review of water requirements. Mandating, city water effectively. There's a whole, in fact, again, we don't have that right now in the ordinance. And there is a page and a half. A page of new water requirements, so. It's a massive upgrade from what is presently in the
Yeah.
ordinance as allowable right now. By right. So I feel like what's there looks pretty good, and this is based on the model ordinance, so I'm definitely in favor of moving forward. If there's a reason to add to that later, we can do it.
And again, the state holds the cards on the enforcement of environmental regs. That's why at the local level, especially on erosion, sedimentation, NPDS, all that, it's delegated by DEP, the conservation district. But when the state needs to step in, they do. And there was some sort of example of that in the past. And that's how the township acquired part of Minnesink Park. 2 acres were donated by Rock Tanks. They did not want to pay the DEP fine.
There's a lot in here in this requirement for the water.
Yeah, that's what I mentioned, yeah, I agree, this is excellent criteria, way above and beyond. The only other thing, you might get upset with me for even bringing this up, but I was talking to somebody from DRBC. Having a conversation with them at another event, and they mentioned how there's some concern about like when they circulate water in these data centers, they add like antibacterial stuff to the water. And it's not clear what happens to the water, like, okay, they're done using it, does that go back? And so there's apparently some conversation that's been occurring about, you know, if they're gonna be using groundwater, water in general, and they're gonna be adding additives to it to prevent fouling, like a bacteria film growing as they circulate it throughout the facility.
Right.
You know, what happens with that additive? Does that just get put back into the street?
Does this talk about having to be on sewer though too?
If it was on sewer, it'd still go to the wastewater plant, it's still enough in the Rocket Creek, that's, you know, what I mean, so there's, you
Well,
know,
within the sewage,
still
the
not-
management of the sewage covers that.
it's just something to think about.
We can't possibly regulate that.
Well, you regulate it in your sewer.
Right, but they're subject to the state law on that, so we don't regulate.
Right,
They handle
the state determines how you manage your wastewater.
Right, they're not gonna allow you to put, you know, toxins and.
So I'm glad they're talking about it.
Detention
I'm glad they're
basins.
talking about it. It doesn't seem like it's relevant for a municipality.
So to be clear, that's the Delaware River Basin, very different than any local
Okay,
entity.
I just thought you might find it interesting.
do we have changes that have to
Jacob,
happen?
so my understanding, I'm just trying to understand. The runoff that you get from the data centers, that goes into people's well system, the township has no regulation of that? Or is that coming from the state?
No, that's not the case. That's covered under regular stormwater, but we're not talking about them discharging, you know, toxins like when you're talking about runoff, we hear it rained over there and the topography, you know, however it's going to run away or be in a detention basin, whatever it might be. That we regulate. We have a whole chapter in the ordinance based on Act 167 about that. But in terms of what actually happens to that water, we don't really regulate that. That's
Correct.
done at the state level.
Let me say, Mr. Chair, that if you're looking at the ordinance, page 6 of 9 under emergency management,
Yes.
B3, it specifically says, no data center shall be approved unless the applicant demonstrates that the procedures for fire suppression, containment, ventilation, evacuation are sufficiently protective of public health, safety, and welfare.
There you go.
And then it goes on to talk about a water feasibility study.
Yeah, the water section is amazing.
And it talks about the fact that has to be, again, an approved section. So there appears to be safeguards for
Yeah.
water and stormwater. And also the Stormwater Act, the ordinance would also apply to any land development
Right.
that would occur. So that you also have that added protection. So there is some protection. It's not just hanging out there.
Right.
Yeah. So that's the section above the water. Okay.
Given that, gonna move on to new business. We can
Wait, what's happening to this next?
informal reviews.
Informal reviews. Wasn't that the last one? This is the one that goes planning commission as well?
Informally to both planning commission.
Yes. we're not formally.
Oh, that was the
triggering
lighting, sorry,
30.
yeah, okay, we're still in the same room, right, okay.
Yes. Under business and the consent agenda, we have the consideration to ratify the special event permit for Liberty Tree Ranch's 4th of July celebration. Consideration to hire Jessica Hodge as administrative coordinator, the consideration to ratify the seasonal parks employment for Ian Rosario, Megan Kishba, Connie Hartley, Romeo DeRose, and Ian Hale. Consideration to decline interest in the ownership of PennDOT Bridge, and the consideration to approve right-of-way documents for Blue Ridge regarding Paper Mill Road. The only thing for.
Oh, can we,
Gone?
will we discuss, should we motion?
Yeah, I was gonna.
I'll motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion by Mr. Albert, I'll second. The big question that I had was, John, on the right-of-way documents, are you guys ready to go with that, or can we make that condition on, your review?
Yeah, I haven't finished everything.
Yeah, that's okay.
If you wanna make it conditional, yes.
So everyone knows, that's to put essentially a fiber optic line down here.
Right. I mean, it doesn't object, am I correct?
Now, the more start of, yeah, fiber optic, better. I mean,
That's
Directly underground.
that's how I would look at it, yeah.
I mean, that's great from our standpoint, because the likelihood it will extend, further.
I will give you a comment on that shortly.
Michael, you consider your motion to be with that condition,
Wait, what's the condition?
that the paper mill road right-of-way documents are subject to the engineer's approval.
Oh, right, to his review, okay, yes, I'll amend my motion.
I'll second that.
So I just have a question, some other question, more of a comment, maybe a question, when was the special event permit submitted?
I received it in the afternoon of the day that you guys were meeting in June.
Okay,
I believe that was.
all right, so it was, yeah, just unfortunate timing.
Yeah.
I guess my one other question is, interestingly, on our permits. I actually don't see a date that they were submitted, which is interesting.
We have a long list of updates related to our permits,
Okay.
that we're going to be revamping. Every permit that we have.
I just wondering, it'd be nice to have a stamp received.
Yes,
Yeah, well, normally they all are.
no,
Just not-
normally we do, because we've had some staff changes.
Okay, great, I was just curious, perfect. Anyway, you told me when it was received, so that's fine. And we're ratifying it anyway, so not much point getting too upset about that.
Yeah. Happened, I didn't hear any complaints. I wanted to go, but I couldn't.
I don't have any other questions.
All right. Anyone else?
Is the post office, the old post office building still on the post office road or the Neeson's old house? Is there anybody in there?
I don't know if that technically is that building or not. I don't know enough about it.
There are two buildings, the post office and residence, they're nice.
I mean, there's 2 or 3 residences or 3 structures.
If I remember correctly from my site visit, they're still there, but they've not been maintained to current standards. No one's been doing that.
So it's obviously, I don't know,
Yes.
and. Municipalities are developing guidelines specific to data centers to help. Regulate or guide decommissioning of data centers. And it provides guidelines how to do it, how to manage it, so this is a thing that we,
I don't think in Pennsylvania.
what is it?
It does matter. Because if it's allowed in another state, we're not going to be allowed to necessarily do the same exact thing.
Yeah, and also downsizing or upgrading, the communities do have, they can put in zoning regulations, guidelines. To help data centers evolve. It's not, I don't think we should short it.
We're not shorting it, but we're.
Anyway, we're actually,
Yeah,
this is
I
our
was gonna say-
comments on the improvement, on the consent agenda, which
I'm sorry.
we're already done with that.
Yeah.
I just don't wanna rehash that, we're not talking about that right now.
You moved on without asking if there are any additional questions, that's why I'm starting.
we had a pretty open window, but I appreciate the thought. All right, anything else? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Yeah, item B is consideration to award the bid for the sale of the 2006 GMC truck, which came in at $15,000.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Albert, second by myself. Any questions?
It was on a municipal bid,
Mhm.
doing the proper procedures for township selling assets, so.
Yeah.
I don't even know why I have to vote on that, but okay.
I think the regs, whenever we sell anything formalized, that we have to basically agree to it, because if someone did do the correct procedure,
Okay,
I don't think they pay us a premium, but I think they pay minutes a bit of premium.
okay.
Alright, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Consideration to award the 2025 materials bid. Julia, do you want to talk about that?
Sure. Smithfield Township received one bid from Eureka Stone Quarry for an approximate award of $362,480. Costs per ton are as follows. PA 2-A subbase was $14.50 a ton. All of these prices will be per ton. Ashto 57, $22. Super paved wearing force 9mm for the 0.0 to 0.3 ESAL is $72.30. Super paved wearing force 9.5mm any ASAL with $72.32. Super paved binder course at 19mm. 0.0 to 0.3 SAL is $64.84. Same binder course with any ASAL, $64.84. Binder course at 25mm with 0.0 to 0.3 ESAL was $58.56. And that was everything.
Right, we're not obligated to take all of it, we're just, that would be the max based on what we.
Right,
Yeah.
that's based on our estimates. We will only actually charge for what our DPW go and pick up.
I'm surprised for that amount of money, there's only one bid. Was this done through?
We did this through the proper process of going out to bid, like we normally do with this. I've seen this one, I think last year we might have gotten two.
Yeah.
Eureka is very close. And.
Close, but they're close to us.
Yeah,
So everyone else are estimating that their transportation costs would be so high. Well, we have to pick it up though.
We would have to pick it up. There is a provision for delivery as well. But we followed the proper bid procedures. We put it out. It was in the Pocono records and we only got one bid. We've signed with this company, I think the last 5 years at least.
Yeah,
I don't think anyone has ever won this bid since I've been here.
yeah,
everyone else.
Anyone else?
I mean, it's a lot of money. Sucks not being able to compare to somebody else, but if there's nobody else that does it.
I think they have most of the county, if I'm not mistaken.
Would not, who else?
The big, I mean, all the numbers look small and they're not big one. The super paved wearing course, 9.5mm, 0.0 to 0.3. I don't even know what that means. Oh, that's because that's 3,000 tons expected, that's why. All right,
I mean, that's the one I guess we use the most.
Yeah, that's what you use to pave. And as far as ESAL, that is equivalent single axle loading. And I don't understand exactly how it works, but it measures the damage that the pavement can take in some fashion or another. Don, do you have any?
That's as good a summary as I could give.
so it can take 0.3mm of damage.
No, it's like one ESAL is one fully loaded single axle truck, I think.
Oh, okay.
Alright. I'll move to award to the low bidder, Eureka. Do I hear a second?
I will second.
Second, Mr. Albert, question? All in favor?
All right, gotta get myself into some quarry action.
Sounds like fun, man.
All right.
We've got a draft fence ordinance in front of us that made some revisions based on our pursuit of a fence ordinance roughly 2 years ago. Because right now, all fencing is subject to the setbacks that any normal development would be, so it kind of defeats the purpose of fencing in your property. It would really be close to your structure. Julia, do you wanna highlight a couple of the key changes? I mean, I think they're
Sure,
removes what the planning commission thought was.
Yeah, there's basically two from, I think, the last time we saw this. First and foremost, the zoning officer recommended this change because of what Jacob said, that currently fences being regarded as structures are required to meet all of our side yard and front rear setbacks, which doesn't make sense for the purpose of fence.
It hasn't been enforced in that way.
Exactly. Prior zoning officer did not enforce it in that way, but by reading the definition, this is what Matt's suggestion is. This adds a 2-foot setback to every property line. That gives you the space that you need, to exist around and perform any maintenance on the fence. And at one point ages ago, we had discussed provisions for putting fences directly on property lines. Given the pushback for that, and this is far easier, we canned that entire section. So all setbacks along the front, the side, and the rear is 2 feet.
Or 2 foot, you said, front, back, and rear,
Yes,
or 2.
yep.
And from what, can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
From what I understand, it can only be like 6 foot high.
This is a brand new ordinance. And it says fence or wall shall not exceed 6 feet in height in residential open space districts. Fence or walls constructed within the front yard shall not exceed 3 feet in height. And shall not obstruct any clear sight triangle. Fence or walls constructed along any street frontage that is not the street of address shall not exceed 6 feet. And shall not obstruct any clear. So if you're along about the street and it's not your front door, I guess. And then in commercial, it can be 8 feet. Commercial, industrial, economic development zone districts, so we should just update that, cause that should say M1.
I need to ask for it now.
Mhm.
So if it's no matter what fence you put in, you still have to get a permit,
Correct.
even if,
So right now, that, cause I had the conversation with Matt as well, cause we had an inquiry about it. It's honestly, to me, it's a little vague and that is open to interpretation of the zoning officer. But because it is a structure, all structures must apply for a permit. However, the way it's also sort of read right now with except for this sort of contention around the setback, as long as it's under 6 feet, it doesn't require a building permit. So all you would do is file your $75 and you'd be issued your
okay,
permit.
or as long as it's under 6
If
foot.
it's under 6
Yeah.
feet, it doesn't require a building permit, so you don't need to have anyone inspect it, it doesn't impact your, it doesn't
Right.
need a reassessment, any of that stuff.
But
No,
you still have to get the 75.
but you still have to pay $75 and get the rubber stamp to say, I've done it, and basically that it tells them it's not over 6 feet, right? That way you submitted something saying it's not gonna be over 6 feet, here it is. And the way it was being enforced was, was basically, oh, you're allowed to do it, so just go ahead. But now Matt is saying, no, you really read it properly, you really need a permit. So this one,
You've gotten mine in before Matt came.
there you go, $75, but it'll be, if it's,
It's not been adopted so far.
well, but that's how he's enforcing it right now.
Yeah.
He is enforcing it, it's gotta be under 6 feet and then you get a permit.
Okay.
But because it's under 6 feet, it doesn't require a building.
Right.
Permit, that's the nuance. I assume this also means the same thing, but it doesn't say that 8 feet.
So
Is it
the height
automatically that it would have to be a
but the
building
width
permit?
Doesn't,
What?
the height matters, but the width doesn't.
Right.
Like if you do your whole
No.
back,
Yeah, correct.
that doesn't, okay.
No.
Thank you.
Does this make it clear that it's allowed? But it needs a building permit? If it's 8 feet?
Well, that would, we can't, I mean, I guess we could, we would have to amend our building codes ordinance, which
Okay.
says that we follow the international building codes.
Okay, and the International Building Codes does have a section on fencing.
Right,
And basically above 6 feet, you have to have meet certain building code criteria.
right. And you need
Okay.
building plans. if you-
So in other words, a commercial, if you're gonna install a commercial one that is between 6 and 8 feet, or, which is the only thing you're allowed to do, you have to have a building permit, so you're not gonna see any commercial above 6 feet, because they're not gonna wanna do a building permit, but anyway, carry on. So no, nothing above 8 feet?
Well, it's the next couple of sections, I identify where you can have the open wire fence. Depending on, I guess,
Up to 15 feet.
yeah. So I guess in that case, I think places like Hayward Labs, stuff like that. Well, that's 15 feet, is pretty tall.
Yeah, but you know, depending on the facility, there might be a need to have,
Right,
keep people out, keep people in.
for sure.
Quick question,
Good.
where did $75 come?
That's on the fee schedule.
Yeah, that's right now, any zoning application is a $75 fee.
At least under, I think it's 500 square feet. Anything above that is $75 plus a couple of cents per square foot.
I think you should have senior citizens. For
So the idea of these fees are they're supposed to cover the cost of the process to handle the permit. That's the idea, that's the theory. I'm not saying it does, because the idea is other citizens should not be taxed to cover what somebody wants to do on their property. That's the idea of why you don't have free fees, because nothing is free, and if it's free, then it means you are paying for Matt's time to review that application. If that's the idea. Although this is one that's pretty quick. So hopefully it doesn't cost $75.
Just the stamp and why.
But that is the problem. I mean, there's filing, there's stuff, it takes time, she spends some
Oh,
time.
yeah, I mean, that's just.
A miserable neighbor that might report you when you have the show.
And generally you calculate those fees in budgeting based on, we did 400 of these, and what was the total cost?
Right.
Divide by 400 to get your. All right, we're almost done, right? I mean,
Yes.
I mean, I don't personally love 2 feet back. I think it, especially when in some cases you're gonna have two property owners that wouldn't mind, sharing on the cost of a fence and one offense dividing their properties. That's my view. I know that, I remember reviewing this when I was a planning commission member, and I didn't like that there was a fee as well. I thought that if you met these criteria, you should not have to, it should be allowed by right and you don't need to get a permit. But I know that causes issues too.
Well, you still have to pay a fee for other by right uses.
Which historically was never enforced in this township.
Well, it is now.
We've always, so like a historic by right use would be like adding a shed to your property, we've always forced individuals.
Yeah,
to get
that-
permits for that sort of stuff.
That's true.
Ken, when you went and asked Ken, he would say that, or he'd say, oh, you can do that. That's what he would say. I'm just,
The number of shed permits I've personally uploaded into our system will disagree at least.
is a lot? Oh, yeah, okay.
But
I mean, I know I actually asked Ken about a fence, and that one, he said, yeah, you can go ahead and do it, as long as it's over 6 feet. And I know that's actually in his right to interpret the zoning that way, and that's why we're having this to clarify, because it is a little vague.
Correct. I mean, I think the whole thing that really hung up the last time was when we wanted to give people the option to have on the property line. And
And the fee amount was hung up, because there were several planning commissioners that didn't like the idea of having to pay $75 to put a fence in. It's fine, it's not a lot of money, fine.
I don't think it's fair.
Well, I think we can look at that, but that doesn't have to be in this ordinance. That's technically on the fee schedule.
And it's also, there's no plot, you don't have to spend any money for the application, it's very, I'm gonna put a fence 6 feet.
Yeah, you just draw it.
You don't even have to draw it, I don't think it's required in the submission. Or is that, does it say that?
We do always, I believe, ask for a plot plan with any zoning and
Yeah.
building application.
Doesn't have to be anything crazy, but like someone came out the other day and they're like, this is my house.
Yeah.
And that's the
Alright.
shed.
Just gotta be, I mean, okay. Oh, just 2 feet from the line, the lot line here.
Right.
Oh, 2 feet, always 2 feet. Yeah.
Well, can you put wording in there so that if there's an instance where you have two people that want to share it, that you could have a variance or something?
It's in already, two people
Okay.
can agree.
Oh, okay.
Where it is-
In writing, and there's a common agreement that entered into that who's gonna repair
That
the
was the
fence,
project.
et cetera.
No, that's been removed.
That was in the draft, the original draft too.
Copy that I have on mine,
Wait, which one?
looking at page 3, under number 3, distance from lot lines.
Me see.
Fences or walls may be constructed along property line if the property
Yes.
owner, well, that's the one I have.
Oh, okay, wait.
Yeah, no, that, I didn't get all of the references.
Okay, perfect. You tried to remove that?
Thought I did, apologies on that one.
Well,
but
I want
You're
that.
okay
No,
with that staying.
I'm fine with it staying. I honestly thought the planning commission's review of that.
It's a different planning commission, so who knows?
I think that they missed. That we weren't trying to encourage everyone to do it, but we wanted the option.
Well, cause then you can imagine a situation where 2 different people want a fence, potentially. And they're gonna wait until the other person builds the fence, cause then they get 2 more feet of property. And then the line gets muddied forever and ever, amen.
Right.
400 years go by, and then this got built, this playground got put there, this happened, and then next thing you know, you're looking at, I've had this here thing for 22 years, and you get people angry at a zoning hearing
Yeah, I
board.
don't like this setback, I don't like that. No.
I'm just saying, that's what happens, because then you've created this line, but visibly and physically there, and somebody else buys it, somebody else buys that, and then there's confusion.
This is why it got killed, the whole thing 2 years ago. So like, this is the very reason, but I don't care if you think it makes sense.
I think if you, honestly, if you make it 6 inches, it's a little bit clearer, cause then it's like very clearly not on their property. That's my feeling.
Yeah, I vote for that.
So the.
Well, you have to be able to
Complicates
maintain
A
it.
little bit more, the argument against 6 inches is that if you are installing a somewhat beefy fence. And you are putting the post within 6 inches, you're not going to reach a point where you are going to feasibly be able to install that fence without stepping on your neighbor's property.
Yes.
And the moment that happens, you are going to run into issues with your neighbor if this is contentious. So the 2 feet gives you a
But
good
that law,
buffer.
that exists as a trespassing law, and that's already there. And the answer is, if you cannot do it, then, yeah, you have to have it back. That, I mean, that would be my argument, that if you have. But I mean, it's relevant because people that are building fences, a lot of time, I mean, I have a fence because I have dogs. But a lot of times people are putting fences because they are not friendly with their neighbors, so it definitely comes up and happens.
Yeah, 2 feet's in there if you wanna change it. Put in whatever you want.
I don't know, what have you guys seen?
I've seen 2 feet,
2 feet?
sometimes even more.
Have you seen on property line too?
I don't know, I've seen on property line too.
Somewhere between
But the
property line
issue
and 2
becomes
feet.
on the property line is, do you have to get onto the other person's property in order to erect a fence, maintain the fence, whatever, so.
Well, when you think about maintaining. You have 2 fences, each set 2 feet off the property line. You can't maintain that 4-foot strip without encroaching on your neighbor's property.
Correct, exactly. So 2 feet doesn't do it either.
Right.
But then you all of a sudden have these like weird 6-foot alleyways through.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
just,
Alright,
well,
personally, I like it on the property.
I mean, maybe there can be. Yeah, I don't know.
So I did look and back from 2022, when we first had this conversation, I have the common fence draft, a wall fence agreement for when it's put directly on the property
It
line.
references that as, this,
Yeah,
here's an
I-
example of
yeah.
a draft agreement you
But
can get.
I did check to make sure that I had that, I can complete that with this. And then if that works for everybody, I'm.
That's just a suggestion, they can come up with their own agreement with their neighbor. I think it says that, it says, an example shall be provided.
Yeah, a common property line wall / fence agreement sample shall be provided by the township.
Right.
So we
But it's a sample, it's not the
Yes.
required, I wanna make sure that's clear, you're not
Yeah, right.
forcing.
And we're not party to any of those, right?
Correct.
Good.
I mean, I guess, yeah. I don't know why. If I'm a neighbor, I'm just being devil's advocate, I'm sorry, we're getting on there.
You're fine.
I'm 50. I'm a neighbor and my neighbor says I'm gonna build a fence, I want you to sign this agreement, and I look this up, and I go, hey, if I don't sign it. They have to go 2 feet back. Great, I'm never gonna sign that document.
As a footwork, can we do a foot? Is that not feasible?
No, but I mean, whatever.
What would?
Send it to the planning commission, see what they say, that's my only issue is on that setback distance.
Right, well, so if
As
6 inches won't work, does,
Or as Robert, apologies, as Ron said, create the ordinance you want and then send it out for comment. So if you don't want 2 feet. What should I update it to before I send it out to the planning commission?
I like property line, but.
I like it too, but we can't require it. I mean, I guess we
Well,
could.
you can say, you can send it back if you want to.
You can be silent.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't know that I don't really care.
You don't have to say.
Well, if we're not silent, then it is interpreted as a structure and it's a 10-foot setback. That's the problem. Right now, it's silent and it gets interpreted, well, the only interpretation is it could be a structure, in which case it's got a 10-foot setback.
Or you can do a text amendment and say a fence is not a structure.
I agree with that too.
Well, how would,
But it's defined in our ordinance as a structure. It says the word fence in the definition of structure.
right.
Well,
Well,
It's not a building.
if we
but
remove
do a
that,
text amendment to redefine structure
well,
and omit fence.
well, isn't that what this definition does?
But then it doesn't require a zoning permit. Oh, I guess it would with this ordinance.
Well, but if you follow what John says, then we go back to how the former zoning officer was interpreting it.
Was that a problem?
No.
I just wanna,
So
I
this,
just wanna
so
fix it.
so if you do what I say, then it fixes it.
Can we do this? This is crazy. Can we have this? And put another one that's just a text amendment and explain it. I genuinely wanna get the input of the planning commission on this.
Okay, so
Fine.
have this ordinance, make the corrections to the commercial / industrial / economic development. I'll correct that language.
Yeah,
Send this as it is otherwise with the common agreement sample to the planning commissions. Along with a drafted text agreement,
1-page text agreement.
1-page ordinance saying,
And someone is there to explain what the heck we're doing. Or what we're asking, which do you like better?
I can do that for you.
quick,
It's not happening in 2 days, but
Oh,
I'll
that's
do it for you.
that's, yeah.
Um,
Quick question. The terms fence and wall do not include hedges, trees or shrubs. So that means I can just say, screw it, I'm gonna plant a whole bunch of trees and shrubs.
Yeah, it's
all the whole property
Called
line.
arborvitae, yeah, arborvitae, and you can plant them right up at on your property line. And they are natural fences,
Right,
they're much nicer. And
Yeah.
much more expensive,
I agree.
Takes years to grow.
Yeah,
10 years, pretty crazy.
Some
And-
people don't have 10 years.
I get you.
You can buy them, they're expensive, but they start out pretty tall, those arborvitae.
You know, we could ask
She's
Alex
back on.
about those 30-foot tall trees that he was talking about earlier.
Yeah, okay. All right,
We'll let that happen.
and that seems reasonable?
That's fine.
Okay, there's no other comments from anybody on this fence? Right,
So I'm sending that to our local planning commission.
just for feedback, yeah.
I don't mind if you give them both and, you know.
Yeah, I wanna hear their opinion.
Well, I was gonna say, give that to. I don't think the county would generate a meaningful review
No, they won't,
on that, yeah,
Just wait, let's just hear what the, cause
That's
that's
fine.
where we got hung up before anyway.
that's fine.
Yeah.
Next is the consideration to send a letter of support for the Fort Hinshaw National Monument designation. So Middle Smithfield, Rep. Probst, Monroe County, they've all submitted letters of support. Essentially, this isn't in Smithfield, but it's in the actual recreation area. 30 years, this country is going to be celebrating the tricentennial of the French and Indian War. And basically, there's a group that has found the former Fort Henshaw site. They would like the federal government to rebuild it and make essentially a museum and a 150-acre radius monument that's around it. I don't have any problem following suit.
Where did this come from?
Danny Younger, he's president of the Lenape chapter number 12, and he's the gentleman that also does some of the archaeology. They've done some of that at various dig sites like the Klein dig site. It's in Middle Smithfield, they supported.
Monroe County supported it, there's their letter.
Yep.
This draft, is this ours or this somebody else's?
Oh, that's
That's
Middle
Middle
Smithfield,
Smithfield.
they passed that. And then there's a letter from Rep. Probst to Congressman Bresnahan.
Alright, and is it just gonna be similar to Middle Smithfield's?
Yeah. I'm not even a resolution, just a letter.
Oh, this is a resolution, we're just gonna do a letter, okay. I make a motion to provide a letter of support for the Fort Hinshaw National Monument designation.
Mr. Albert, I'll second. Any questions? All in favor?
I
Aye.
think we lost Robert a while ago. What are we gonna put for the record on his votes that we?
Let's say that-
That we lost his,
Yeah, I made a note somewhere at the time in
that he was
my
still on
draft
during
that we
meetings.
were having Robert's experiencing connectivity issues back when we were discussing the lighting ordinance. So I think I will, unless we hear back from him, you've been able to hear everything, I'll put it.
Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't have rationale to abstain, so,
Correct.
okay.
Public comment? Bye.
You're all here just to listen.
I'll entertain the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, motion by Mr. Albert, I'll second. All in favor?
Aye,
Aye. Thank you, everybody.
right.